We have 2 attendees so far.
Are there your consultants? Is it Marcelo? Marcelo and Ruben are.
Yes.
Joseph's here, okay.
5 attendees.
The meeting is being recorded. Okay.
It seems to be stabilized. Yeah, we're ready when you are.
Okay. Okay, it being 6:30, let's go ahead and open the meeting. Before we get started, due to recent incidents of interruptions with meetings with hateful speech, there is a statement I'd like to read. So recently, regional and local elected and appointed bodies have been subject to disruptive racist verbal attacks by anonymous callers during virtual public comments. The city of Mountain View is fully committed to racial, religious, and cultural equity and justice as we strive to create a welcoming, safe, and inclusive community for all. This advisory body welcomes respectful and non-threatening public comments regarding matters over which the advisory body has jurisdiction. Comments deemed otherwise pursuant to the Council Code of Conduct and the Government Code may be grounds for immediately terminating a speaker's comment period. Okay. Our first order of business, let's see, the item number is the approval of the minutes.
Roll call.
Oh,
Chair roll call.
Oh, roll call, sorry. Thank you for the reminder. Okay, roll call. So,
I can call.
okay, thank you.
Member Bronte,
Yeah, here.
member Adamic,
Here.
member Stone,
Here.
Vice Chair Kuzma,
Present.
Chair Barton,
Present.
all is present. Thank you.
Okay, so we're ready for the review and approval of minutes.
So
item
item
3 is
communications.
public comment
Oh,
or communications.
certainly. So the public is invited to make comments on any item not on the agenda. So let's go to Zoom. Are there any members of the public wishing to make comments?
I do not see any hands raised on Zoom.
Thank you. In the room, are there any members of the public wishing to make comments on an item not on the agenda? Thank you. Okay, let's go ahead then. Now, I think we are ready for approval of the minutes. So opening for comments or a motion.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Oh, sorry, I had a question.
Okay, so we're going to public comments first on
Committee clarifying questions.
committee clarifying questions, if that's what we have.
Maybe, yes. I think at one point, now I'm having trouble bringing it up. It says that I asked for a presentation to be shown during the election of new chair and vice chair, but I think it was in the Vision Zero segment.
Oh,
But that's it. Totally minor, doesn't matter, but yeah.
okay. So maybe in the motion, we can. Oh, to share the, I see. So it should be in which item?
The Vision Zero education item.
Okay, so move that comment to 6.4.
That's right, we'll just reference which comment, I want to make sure we
Yeah.
don't lose the comment that was. Which comment is it that you're referring to?
Oh, it just says that I asked for a presentation to be shown, which was just like the small slide deck. And it was just entered under one item, but it should have been under
I
another.
thought you requested the manual, because there's a flow chart in the.
Oh, yes, that is it.
That-
Okay,
that
so
was in the
no
members manual.
modification.
Oh,
Thank you, thank you.
So any additional clarifying questions? Okay, is there a motion then at this point? Oh, we're back to public, excuse me. Public comments on the minutes of meeting of January 20th.
I don't see any hands raised on
None
Zoom.
on Zoom, any in the room? Seeing nobody coming forward, I think we can move forward for committee discussion.
And no, I read the minutes, although I misread that one thing, but I thought they're very comprehensive and nice, and I move to approve. That's okay.
I can second that motion.
Okay, we have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you for item 4.1. Moving on to item 6.1. Moffett Boulevard Complete Streets Project 24-03. I believe we're starting with a staff presentation.
All right, good evening, committee members. My name is Nancy Chen. I'm the Assistant Engineer with the Public Works Department, and I'm presenting on the Moffett Boulevard Complete Streets project tonight. With me tonight is Joy Houghton. She's Senior Civil Engineer. So as we get started on the presentation, this aerial photo shown here illustrates the project area with the project location shown in green. The project location adds an extra level of complexity due to the project right-of-way coordination that is needed. First, Caltrans coordination is needed throughout the entire corridor from SR 85 on-ramp all the way north towards Clark Road, which is shown in the purple there. SFPUC's aqueduct runs through the south end of the roadway by Middlefield Road, shown in the dark blue. Moffett Airfield and NASA is to the north, shown in the orange. PG&E also has a substation located just northwest of the roadway by Leong, shown in the yellow, and also a tower easement running parallel with Stevens Creek Trail. The Stevens Creek Trail crosses just east of SR 85, running parallel with the highway shown in the lighter blue here. Also, a little bit of project background to look at the timeline this project has taken so far. In 2015, the city contracted with BKF engineers to conduct a bikeway feasibility study for the corridor as part of a planning item. In June 2022, a virtual community meeting was held to gather input on bikeway alternatives, and BPAC was also presented the Complete Streets checklist for the OBAG 3 grant application for review and comments. At the start of 2023, the city was awarded $3.5 million through the OBAG 3 grant. And to secure this grant, council adopted a resolution providing local support, committing matching funds, and stating assurance to complete the project. This past June, City Council authorized professional services agreement with BKF for design services and to provide construction support, and the design was kicked off this past fall. This project, as I mentioned, is federally funded with the One Bay Area grant funds. The scope of the project is dictated by the grant application, and the project design must be approved by Caltrans local assistants to meet the grant scope. The city will start coordinating with Caltrans local assistants in the coming months and estimating to construct the project in 2026 to meet the grant timeline requirements. Funds need to be obligated by January 2027, which means design and Caltrans approval needs to be obtained by then. So the project scope elements, first and foremost, includes pavement rehabilitation on Moffett Boulevard. And in conjunction with that, we will be installing Class 4 bike lanes with vertical separation throughout most of the roadway. There will be Class 2 bike lanes at a pinch point, and green conflict striping will be included at driveways, bus stops, and intersections where there are turning movement points. The sidewalk gap closure is proposed on the east side of the roadway between Leong Drive and Stevens Creek Trail. and median modifications will be made to accommodate the bike lanes and buffers and vertical elements. Currently along the roadway, as mentioned, there is a sidewalk gap. This is on the east side of the roadway between Stevens Creek Trail and Long Drive, as shown on the upper left picture. There's pinch points shown in the bottom two pictures on the screen. SR 85 undercrossing and US 101 overcrossing. Moffett Boulevard is also designated as a truck route and bus route, which require minimum 11 feet travel lanes. There's limited right of way along the project location, as was mentioned in a previous slide, that constrains the space that's available for us. Access MV has also identified this segment of Moffett to be a high level of stress for bicyclists and recommends bike and ped improvements along this corridor. And in order to accommodate a continuous bikeway along the corridor, removal of approximately 18 parking spaces is proposed on the east side of the roadway adjacent to the Willow Park apartment complex. A parking study was conducted in August 2024 along the entire length of the project, and only one vehicle was observed throughout the study with adequate off-street parking available. We'll be bringing the parking removal item to council for consideration this spring. Staff also evaluated input provided by residents from the June 2022 community meeting and the costs associated with the preferences to identify an appropriate scope for the project design based on available budget and right of way. What is pictured here are just examples of the vertical elements and not necessarily the exact item to be installed. And based on existing constrictions of right of way, flexible post delineators or similar vertical separation is proposed along most of the corridor. And where space permits, rubber curb islands similar to those installed on Leong, shown on that right picture, along with vertical elements are proposed along the roadway. Again, what is pictured are examples of what will be used, not the exact item. So over the next slides, I'll be walking you through segment by segment, the proposed improvements and cross sections along the corridor. We'll be starting from the south side at Middlefield Road and move north to Clark Road city limits. Each slide will have an overview layout, a cross section of existing conditions, and a cross section of proposed improvements. So here we are at the first segment of the proposed design. Please note that cross sections are not currently showing the vertical elements, but vertical delineators are proposed throughout the entire vertical delineators are proposed throughout the buffers except where turning movements conflict. And travel lanes maintain a minimum 11 feet width throughout Moffett due to it being a truck route, but lane width narrowing is still being proposed along the roadway. So in segment A here, from Middlefield Road to SR 85, there are no existing bike facilities. In order to make room for the bike lanes, buffers, and vertical delineators, center and median modifications are proposed along with lane width reductions. Green conflict striping will be added where driveways and bus stops are conflicting. The intersection of Middlefield Road will be completed in the Middlefield Road Complete Streets project, and the design will be coordinated as that project progresses. Here at segment B, we're at the SR 85 undercrossing where there's a pinch point. There's adequate space for bike lanes and buffers and delineators in the existing shoulder in the southbound direction. However, in the northbound direction, medium modifications, which require Caltrans approval, are needed to accommodate bike facilities. A small segment of rubber curb separation is proposed in the pink, where there is adequate width to provide extra separation between vehicles and bicyclists. Here at segment C, the sidewalk gap closure is shown in blue, connecting Leong Drive to Stevens Creek Trail. Vertically separated bike lanes will be added to the existing shoulder in the southbound direction. In the northbound direction, the existing buffered bike lanes will add new vertical post delineators, vertical delineators and conflict striping as traffic approaches Leong Drive. Here is segment D, the existing bike lane ends as it approaches the intersection of US 101 ramp intersection due to the existing median width. Median modifications will allow for the bike lane to continue through the northbound intersection approach. And rubber vertical curve separation is proposed where there is additional width in the roadway, shown in pink, to provide better separation between the vehicles and bikes. Vertical delineators and buffer will be added in the southbound direction as well. In segment E, we are crossing over the US 101 pinch point. The vehicle travel lanes will be narrowed to accommodate 6 feet bike lanes on the Caltrans overpass bridge. However, due to the limited width, the roadway will not be able to accommodate buffers or vertical elements. An extended conflict striping area is included adjacent to the right turn pocket onto US 101 ramp, shown on the right in this slide or in the north end of the segment. And finally, in this last segment, we approach the Clark Road and city limits. There are existing bike lanes, and the project will add buffers with delineators, mostly maintaining the alignment to meet the intersection outside of the city limits as shown in the red dotted line. So our next steps, we'll be taking BPAC's feedback to CTC next week on Tuesday. And BKF will assist with initiating the design coordination with Caltrans. Additional coordination is needed for environmental clearances, grant funding, and etc. We're anticipating design completion by the end of 2025 with construction anticipated in 2026. This wraps up my presentation. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, we're going to public comment. No, we're clarifying questions, sorry. Record. So clarifying questions from committee members on the presentation or design. Mara, go ahead.
Yes, so I'd asked a question about like traffic counts and road diet and so on, and the response said something like a road diet and other improvements will be considered through the active transportation plan. My understanding was that the active transportation plan is already kind of nearing final stages. So how would this be considered in the active transportation plan? Or is it kind of like it was already raised and therefore it's already part of the active transportation plan?
Perhaps I can speak. So
Yeah.
there will be cross sections as part of the active transportation plan for things that go beyond this project, but this project is kind of in design now and will be constructed first. So does that respond to your questions?
Yeah, I guess my question is like, it's already like a consideration in the plan as it is being finalized now?
This project, so,
No, not this project, but a road diet from Clark.
oh, I see.
To Moffett.
Yes, so that's something that would be considered as part of the active transportation plan that goes beyond this project.
But the timing, I guess, this project would be said and done, as
Yes.
it were.
Yes,
And it would either have to be a separate project or another repaving cycle before that might be addressed.
yes.
And then just generally, the clarifying questions and responses, are they only emailed to us or are they available to the public?
They're posted on Legistar, so they're available for the public.
Thanks.
Saw that there first before I saw my email.
Oh, great.
Okay, additional questions from committee members?
I have one. So I didn't see anything about crossings. I mean, was it not in scope or like pedestrian crossings or?
So to clarify, pedestrian crossing, meaning pedestrian crossings across Moffett Boulevard?
Yeah, so because I didn't see anything, related to this, and it's kind of a complete street. So I was just wondering if it was in scope, and I don't know the whole history of this thing because it started as a bikeway, but I just wanted to know. So
Middlefield and Moffett.
The crosswalks, we're not changing crosswalks along the corridor. We are closing the one sidewalk gap as mentioned. The intersection at Middlefield will be improved as part of the Middlefield Road Complete Streets. There's one crosswalk, I believe that is not a high visibility crosswalk. We will be improving that one as well. On Leon Drive.
and as a follow-up, what is the behind high visibility crosswalk? I mean, because there are quite a range of treatments. So,
The high visibility crosswalk, currently it's just the double stripe. It'll be upgraded to a ladder crosswalk.
So Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer. So I would just wanted to clarify your question if you were interested in a new crossing such as a mid-block or just improvements to any
I
crosswalk.
think in general, I mean, but, I mean, giving, the budget of things like this, I mean, at least make the ones we have better, so. I don't-
Yeah, so just to add to Assistant Engineer Chen's response.
Yeah.
So the ladder crosswalks are kind of the city standard that we implement those with the high visibility, the better retro reflective materials. If there's a different application, we're open to considering another application. The mid-block crossing was not part of the original scope, so we would be open if you wanted us to consider that, but we didn't have a specific location.
I think it's
in mind.
beyond the clarification.
Thank you.
Stick to that.
Yeah. I think you want to go ahead?
No.
Commissioner Stein.
I had that also, the question about crosswalks, but it's already been asked. Maybe I missed it. How much does the median at the pinch point need to be narrowed? How many feet? Do you know?
Under 85.
Under 85, it needs to be narrowed about 3 feet.
Okay. And in the clarifying questions, there was a lot of talk about it being a grant, and so we're constrained in what we can do. Is the constraint because it needs to be done quickly, or because they would need more funding, or a combination of both?
It's a combination of timing and funding. In addition, the scope has been predetermined through the grant application process, and changes to the grant application scope could potentially, we would have to discuss that further with Caltrans local assistance.
Right, so if we wanted to expand the scope theoretically, we would need to have a different project that we've done in conjunction with this project. That would be how it could potentially be managed, or since this project itself is constrained, but we're doing the repaving next year, if there's something that makes sense to do in the repaving, I guess theoretically, would it work that way, or? It would have to be a whole different project on a different CIP and et cetera.
Hi, I'm Ed Orengo. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director. So your question is, you're looking to see if there's other elements that can be introduced along this corridor, but separate from this project?
Yeah, I guess there was a lot of questions in the clarifying questions. Why didn't we do this? Why didn't we do that? And the answer was that we're constrained. And I guess theoretically, if there is something that everybody decided we want to do, it would need to be a different CIP project. Is that
So
correct?
we would recommend that any additional elements be looked at separately from this project. Again, this is it's a federally funded project.
Mhm.
We know that we're sort of on pins and needles on the federal grant funding. We don't want to create any ripples in the water.
Mhm.
So being consistent with what we got approved for the grant on the scope and delivering the project within the project budget is really our strategy and our focus. So any additional elements would have to be a separate project.
That's what I thought. Thank you very much.
Yeah, first I was gonna check, I do not know the answer to this. Is there currently no right turn on red from the 85 off ramp onto Moffett Boulevard? I believe the answer is no, but I don't know for sure.
I don't believe there is a no right turn.
There is none, I mean, I backed out today.
Okay. The second question was, is there any history behind the reason why the sidewalk on the 101 overpass is on the side of the street that it is? It's always struck me as odd that it's on the side that has to cross two on-ramps rather than the side that doesn't. I was just curious if anyone knew the history behind that.
It predates all of us.
Okay. And following on, I think, to member Dominic's questions about traffic counts, do we have any understanding of what did or didn't happen when the when various construction for, I don't know what reason, reduced the lanes to one in each direction during last year for several months? What impacts on traffic that had?
Yeah. Robert Gonzalez again, Principal Civil Engineer. I believe you're referring to a closure that Caltrans initiated over 101.
Yeah.
So I don't believe, we would have to reach out to Caltrans to confirm this, but I don't believe there were traffic counts taken during that time period.
All right, but we don't believe do we know if there are any reports of problems associated with the traffic as a consequence of that?
That would take some staff research, like we could reach out to PD to see if there was any conflicts that were reported. And we can look back to see if there was anything that came up through Comcast.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't believe prior reports from Ask Mountain View reported.
Those were the only additional questions I had. Oh, shoot, sorry, this does count as a question. Aruna, that there's pictures that I sent you. Can you pull them up? I think the first slide.
Is that in clarifying questions?
Yes, it's a question about so on this might be answered before I get this up, but are there any changes to the curbs at all? I'm thinking in particular about the curbs around where the Stevens Creek Trail meets the, so in this diagram exactly currently, if you are going on a bike from northbound on the Stevens Creek Trail to northbound on 101, you sort of do this curve through the pedestrian curb cut. Are those curbs and curb cuts intended to stay the same currently?
We currently don't have a proposed change to the curb, but
Okay.
based off of the cross sections or the overview,
Yeah.
the bike lane itself is going to be bumped out a little bit, so
Okay.
then the bike lane will be continuing around that curb.
Okay. Thank you. I probably will have comments on that later, but that's comments.
Okay, further questions? Okay, I guess my question relates to the idea of the road diet and the traffic counts. Are there any traffic counts scheduled? And if not, how soon could they be done?
Staff would have to coordinate with the transportation group to see if there was anything scheduled. I believe we were looking for funding to perform those traffic counts.
So our best experience then is the Caltrain closures on the effect of a single lane versus 2 lane.
Right, without additional data, correct.
Timeline,
Timeline, I'd have to coordinate with transportation. One, there's a resource issue about whether they would have to either be freed up to perform the traffic counts in-house, or we would be looking at additional funding to fund a traffic count through a consultant and get those out there. So I'd have to coordinate with the transportation group to identify which course of action we would take.
and is that a 90-day, 180-day, or what would be typical, I guess?
That's a Brandon question, but if the funding were in place, then it would probably be in the 90 to 120 day timeframe.
Okay. No further clarifying questions? Okay, moving on to public comment. Comments on Zoom or commenters on Zoom?
I don't see any hands raised. Oh, there. Yes. April Webster, you can unmute yourself. And we have 3 minutes for you. April, if you are talking, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Oh, you can? Okay, great. I would like to state that I think a road diet on Moffett is the safest and most cost-effective solution. The Federal Highway Administration found that road diets reduce crashes by 19 to 47%. Yet the city plans on keeping 4 lanes of fast-moving traffic, which increases crash risk for all users, including drivers. Moffat's four-lane setup is inherently dangerous. It encourages high speeds, unpredictable vehicle movements, and forces pedestrians and cyclists to navigate riskier crossings. While flex posts provide a visual barrier, they do nothing to actually slow traffic and provide better safety. I'm really concerned that no traffic volume study has been conducted to actually justify those 4 lanes. The studies are typically quick, inexpensive, and take often less than a week. Yet the city hasn't done this. A parking study was conducted, but not even a basic traffic count, which is really critical for understanding the demand. I'm concerned that that wasn't done. I know Mountain View prides itself on taking a data-driven decision-making approach. So I wonder why that wasn't applied here. Anecdotally, I've used this overpass for 15 years, and I've never seen significant traffic. From what I understand from people I've reached out to in the industry, they only cost tens of thousands of dollars, if that. And take maybe a week at most. So it seems like something that we could push through easily. I want to also say that road diets are proven on overpasses. San Jose, the Almaden Expressway over 87, Contra Costa, an overpass over 80, et cetera. They've all done it successfully. And the claim that Moffat's truck and bus route prevents a road diet isn't true. The Federal Highway Administration and Caltrans both recognize road diets work on truck routes as long as lane widths are preserved. And this was why interchanges were actually taken out of DIB 94. I think the cost and timeline concerns are, they seem overstated to me. The road diet uses the exact same materials, paint and flex posts as the current plan. It's just placed differently on the road. I think the redesign cost maybe a few $100,000 from what I've seen in similar ATP projects. This is minimal compared to the 3.5 million budget. And at a 35% design, this is the ideal time to make those adjustments. I thank you for your comment, or for my opportunity to comment, and I really hope that you'll reconsider.
Mary Teteo, you can unmute yourself to talk.
Hi, good evening. I have not really been involved in any previous reviews of this project, but my one comment would be that I think as we move forward with similar projects, when we have a situation where there's not enough space to have a bike lane plus a protected, buffer space in between, I would like to see us start considering raising the bike lane to the level of the sidewalk. So that gives us the full bike lane width without stealing any, without needing any buffer space, because we get the separation by the height of the bike lane. So I don't know if that makes sense in this particular situation, because I'm just now looking at this project, but it also, I think we need to start considering that as an option. The other thing I guess I'd comment is I just really hate to see right turn lanes to the right of the bike lane. That is, as a cyclist, that makes me extremely nervous, especially on an area where there's an on-ramp to the highway, because people are already thinking higher speeds, and this is just really makes me nervous. I would not feel comfortable at all using the bike lanes the way they're designed here. Thank you.
Celia Paymer, please unmute yourself to talk.
Hi, my name is Celia Paymer, resident of Mountain View for 15 years. I'm now in the Blossom Hill neighborhood, but I used to be in Rex Manor. And I'll be honest, back then I was not so much of a cyclist. And I always took the Moffett Boulevard off-ramp when coming home from work because there was no traffic there. It was glorious. There's no other cars in that area. So I second what April said about a traffic study. needing to be done, because I do think a road diet makes a lot of sense there. I was sort of confused because I'm also a little bit new to this project, but I'd always heard it referred to as one of the complete street projects, but this doesn't look complete at all. It looks very car centric, focused on the needs of drivers, not on the needs of cyclists or pedestrians. And so I hope, or green space for that matter. So I hope we can maybe look at this in the lens of a real complete streets project and lower those speeds and make it safe for all users and maybe a little more pleasant too. Thank you.
That's all the speakers.
Hey, any speakers in the room? Okay, seeing none, we can move on to committee comments. Hey, James, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think once we go through if we assemble things into small motions, but when you pull up the things, I just want to run through some minor notes and maybe some notable notes that I think are easiest when we're looking at a map. Yeah, so to the point I was asking about curb cuts, right now, the bicycle movement, which I think is actually consistent with the concern any public commenter or email is raising. When you're trying to go from the trail onto Moffett Boulevard, you sort of end up riding straight out into traffic at a right angle and then trying to turn. That may be as simple as adding a grinding a curb cut that's more straight into the bike lane. It may be a very small note, so, but it right now would be nice. I also drew a line in red to indicate what the sort of current path right now is if you are trying to avoid Moffett for a bit. If we go to the next slide. I don't know what to suggest, if anything, but the thing that sort of highlights is there's a couple paths you can take from the trail to get onto northbound Moffett right now that I have done. I think all of these in the last few years, except for the yellow one, which I lasted at least 10 years ago. And I wanted to note that Leong Drive intersection is surprisingly uncomfortable to navigate that way on a bike or on foot because cars come flying out of the Moffett Boulevard intersection doing left or right turns, and they don't have to stop before they enter Long Drive. And so I don't know statistically how unsafe it is, but getting the traffic coming off of Moffett slower would be desirable. I think that would fit in with some of the comments about road diets. Next. This one. I think it would be desirable to work through how to make some of the left turn movements at intersections easier for cyclists, because currently if you're coming on southbound Moffett and trying to get onto the trail, you either have to cut across traffic to turn left onto Long and then get onto the trail. That's what red is. You can do these sort of two-stage turn by sort of veering onto I don't know what the name of that road coming out of the Ameswell region is, and then going straight across, which currently is possible. It just isn't really provided for by the layout of the roads. It's not well signed. It's not what you obviously should do, or you can stay on Moffett for longer and then turn once you get to the trail, which leaves you on a busier road for longer, which most people don't like as much. Although with this protection, with protected bike lanes, that might be less of a big deal. Next. Oh, this is just me throwing up a note about to the road diet. I think it would be good if we at least figured out what MTC's opinion on altering the scope to include some sort of road diet is. Like the fact that I went to Google to grab a picture of what the overpass looked like and realized that the version of Google Maps I was looking at still had that those reduced lane markings on it. And from having used that overpass on a bike, and I don't know that I ever did it on foot, but certainly on a bike, it was much nicer than currently in both directions. And if you were on foot, then you had a nice, much more protected, much wider sidewalk than you do right now. And if we go to the next slide. Oh, what's that? I don't know what I was trying to make a point here. Next slide. this is just a note about what having the ability to walk on both sides of the roads. I don't know that this is feasible to do in this project, given that trying to have pedestrians on the southbound side of Moffett would require more space than just a bike lane's width. But if we were doing a road dye and had a extra 11 feet from taking away a car lane, then it might be reasonable to basically have the same treatment we did when Caltrans was doing that repaving. And then a pedestrian can have significantly fewer conflict points, as sort of shown by the circles. Significantly fewer conflict points if they are trying to walk across. For instance, if someone's trying to go from the Amesville Hotel to Moffett, to Ames Research Center or the such. So, yeah, I think that's all I had in terms of visual assistance. And the sort of summaries, I do think we should be finding out if a road dye is reasonable. The other thing that would help with is the State Route 85 southbound on-ramp, where currently vehicles turning left from northbound Moffett onto the on-ramp have to cross 2 lanes of high-speed traffic. And I have personally executed that maneuver multiple times, and I have been in cars, I've seen that maneuver a lot, and it's never particularly comfortable. Having lower speed traffic and only having to cross 1 lane would be safer and more comfortable. And on intersections, to repeat the comment from Mary Didio, having at the very least making it so that the right lanes are on the inside of the roadway set relative to the bike lane would be very valuable. Like that's the case at the RT Jones intersection right now. It seems pretty reasonable to stripe the roadway such that that is an option here. That might mean we say there's no right turn on red, so that there's not cars trying to turn across the road or across the bike lane until, say, there's a leading pedestrian interval has gone. But that would be a valuable improvement, even if we can't go to full protected intersections. Park removal is great. I agree that that's not, my anecdotal evidence confirms that's not highly used. I think alongside a road dye, I don't know if any locations make sense for good new pedestrian crossings. The one spot that struck me as potentially useful would be just south of 85. But I don't know how much demand there is for pedestrian traffic there, so I don't know how important it is. But it is a long gap. The only reason it might not be an issue is because things like 85 and the PG&E substation and all that makes it there's not actually all that much stuff on either side of the road. Oh, and I was curious about, I wanted to get one question just on the record. My understanding is that raising the bike lane would be to, say, sidewalk level would be a very expensive alteration, but it did come up in public comments, and my understanding is it'd be expensive, so that's why I'm not inclined to push on it as much, but is that correct?
Yes, potentially, because it could mean relocating our existing storm drainage,
Okay.
which are along curb
Okay.
lines.
I think those are all the general comments I had. I tried to, summarize with the committee later.
Thank you, Member Guzmal. Further comments? Member Stone?
Also have some comments. James was very comprehensive. Thank you. I wrote them down because I forget things. So in the memo, it says lane widths are 11 foot. And I was looking at various standards. In DIB 94, for example, they recommend 1 lane at 11 foot and 1 at 10.5. And then in the NACDO urban street design, it's also 1 lane at 11 foot and the other lane at 10. Well, I was asking about the median. You can save up to 2 feet there. It doesn't quite get us to where the median is, but it might allow, if we go by these standards, a little more buffer, more protection, leaving aside the potential of a road diet. Yeah. Oh, yes, on the additional crossings, the gap between I'd have to get up to it, but the gap with the 85 underpass. There is a sidewalk on the west side up until the underpass where it just ends. And there is no way to cross safely without backtracking a very long distance. So I think that it is a very long distance with no crossings. It would be nice if there was a crossing there for that reason. I have been stuck there and ended up walking against traffic under the freeway with not just myself, but my brother and his small children. It was very uncomfortable. We were just going to the trail and didn't know that the sidewalk ended. And yeah, you're right next to very high speed traffic. So I think for that reason, we should consider some sort of crossing or something there. And yeah, that's my main thing. And I would like to see, we may talk about this more later, a road diet and some way to make it fit in the funding and the time constraints we have. And maybe we don't have to redo medians, like it's just, that's something we can work out. I don't know, I'm not the expert. Those were my comments.
Going online, Muradamic?
Yes, I want to say that I really love the constraints in this project, that there's a budget, that it needs to be built next year. And that whatever we say probably in this committee is not gonna like delay it another 5 years or something like that. So I really appreciate that, you know, if the funding stays, that this will actually be built. And about a week ago, I was biking along Fairchild and Leong, and I was like, oh gosh, this doesn't make sense. There's like a bike lane only on one side and then Sharrow's on the other, and there are these humps and like, what is this? And then I thought, but it's here. And I really appreciate that. So I think it was like a great initiative to grab this funding and to like work out a plan that can be done. Of course, I would love if there was like, I'd asked about the road diet and the clarifying questions. I think that makes a lot of sense. And maybe if it's feasible, as the other committee members have said, that would be great to do. I also agree with Mary Teo's. I'd also ask in the clarifying questions, you know, were other designs considered, such as raising the bike lane to sidewalk level? But, you know, it's not possible because of cost and complexity. And so, okay, that's fine. I do hope that eventually speed limits will be examined and the no ride on red, just because you'll actually have bicyclists. Like I helped to organize a bike ride down Stevens Creek Trail to Mountain View High School last spring. And there was the question of, oh, will we have a stop at Moffett? And I just thought, no way, you know, we don't want to encourage any bicyclists on Moffett because it's not safe enough. And I didn't want that responsibility. So there was no stop at Moffett. And I think maybe after these improvements, even as proposed, are made, one could have a stop there. So I think that's really positive. And then I have a minor thing that might be just my problem. Is it possible to bring up any of James's slides that show where the it's just that like when you're heading, I guess south towards maybe a different one. Yeah, this one to the left.
That's just going north, by the way. There's just one of the routes going south as well, if you want.
This is, I think this, yeah, they're all fine, but it like, if you're going south, if south is down.
Yes.
It forks, and I just feel so dumb because every few years, because I never go on Moffett, but I was trying to get to Leong and I end up at the gate at the right part of the fork. So I just wonder if that gate could be moved up so that, you know, people like me don't like end up there and then wonder like why they can't.
On the southbound Stevens Creek Trail. You mean,
Yeah.
Where so that's sort of where it forks into, at first it forks to the bridge and to Moffett, and then it forks into where you actually onto Moffett. Yes, versus a like random access gate that is always closed.
Yes, so totally minor, but you know, if it's at all while the project is being done, just to think maybe moving that gate to like, so it's less confusing for people like me. Thanks, but overall, I'm so glad that, staff took initiative to get funding for this and to design it and everything.
So I do like the opportunity. So, there was some money, we grab it and we try to make things better. And I think, I have a long wish list of things that I would like to do, but given the constraints and given the uncertainties also in DC, where we see, funding being stripped, just by, some tech bro, I think there is, we shouldn't rock the boat and try to keep it kind of on the radar as much as we can. So I'd like to propose some additions though on the existing crosswalks. So if you look at the NACTO, guidelines for crosswalks, high visibility, having ladders or zebras, are definitely the norm. But it's not the only thing that's recommended. It's also making sure there is proper lighting on the crosswalk, not, for the cars or on the sidewalk only. It's also make sure, obviously, that the ADA, ramps are correct, and I don't know the status there, but it's something that should be addressed, I think, during this project, because it's a liability for the city. And the other thing that's recommended by NACTO is to have the stop bar that's kind of provides a buffer from cars or vehicles, including bikes, really, and the things. And I think the recommendation is like 8 or 9 feet. And I think it's something that's literally just a piece of paint, but I think it's important. Sadly, that was not done on El Camino. So, there is a little bar, but it's like maybe, I don't know, inches or it's definitely not 8 or 9 feet, but it's very cheap things to do. And it does provide a good reminder not to encroach on things, which is illegal to start with. And the final two more comments. One is that the lighting on the underpass is very poor, and it's pretty seedy area or blight. And I don't know, I had asked in the clarifying questions that Caltrans is in charge of this. So to me, it's blight. So I mean, there should be something in the books to bring it up, because it's pretty much just a unfinished basement, really, with dirt that falls down the road, and it's just very sketchy, walking or even biking there. So anything that can be done to improve this. And then I had one suggestion on one intersection. That's pretty much where there is kind of a turning lane really from Moffett onto Leon. I'm not sure that's really needed. Again, I don't know the traffics, but I think that would be a good place to put a no right on red. And the advantage there is that you wouldn't have that conflict when you bike with people turning there, because it's pretty much like a slip lane, really, because there is no control there. So that would be my recommendations or suggestions. Sorry.
Okay. Go ahead.
I remembered one, I forgot. I guess, is it in scope of this project to reduce the turning radius at some of these intersections?
Currently, there are no proposed curb changes,
Mhm.
but it could be something we can consider.
Member Kuzamal's, Vice Chair Kuzamal's presentation reminded me that the intersection at Leon, people turn very quickly. And I don't know if anywhere else, but that one in particular, because you have to cross there if you're going to the Ameswell. You have to cross there and cross. Getting to the Ameswell from the trail is, I'm glad that they're building that bridge, because right now, if you're going southbound, you gotta go and cross Moffett twice and cross Leon. And it's, all of those crossings are very uncomfortable crossings as a pedestrian. But yeah.
There are, but reducing turn radii can include things like rubber curbs, like exist at Moffett and Central Avenue.
Yeah, exactly. I saw them in the design, and yes, that would I appreciate if you would look.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead. So my experience primarily was a few years ago. This was part of my primary commute when I was biking, and I wasn't a daily, but I was probably 2 or 3 times a week going through. So I remember when Leong had nothing, and it was always very scary, and at least there's something now. So there is value in getting things done. I guess I am disappointed maybe in myself if I had comments to have input earlier on this project and I missed it. But to me, it seems like any place we have a 4-lane road, especially one near biking infrastructure and attractions like the Stevens Street Trail, we should be doing traffic counts well in advance of a significant investment such as even a repaving project. So I guess I'm disappointed we as a commission, if we had the opportunity, didn't suggest or identify that. Perhaps going to a road diet, and the fact that anecdotally, it looks like traffic's very light. Even the picture of the lane closure showed minimal traffic. So it seems like the counts would verify that there's no need for 4 lanes. That frees up things, just shifting paint, perhaps for less work on the median, perhaps for more work or more comfort for pedestrians and for cyclists. So I think the paint and a road diet is a step toward things that we've heard, like the complete streets and maybe other sidewalk improvements or raising levels. But the road diet and a paint treatment seems like it could still fit in the timeline, and with some accommodation, maybe there's some pluses and minuses in the budget. So I'm strongly in favor of taking steps to identify traffic counts and have those discussions that were mentioned. It can be discussed. I don't know what the specific scope was. It's adding safety improvements. If that's the scope, road diet would certainly be within that scope. So I'm strongly in favor of making a recommendation in a motion that says something to the extent that we believe all efforts should be made to get a traffic count and support of a potential road diet that could be done. A paving project, I think, is supposed to be an 8 or 10-year cycle. They usually end up being closer to 12 or 15. And so if we have a window now that we can impact something that may not change for 12 or 15 years, when complete streets and the active transportation plan might get around to making a change, I believe we should at least pursue that now.
That was a motion? Was that a motion?
I didn't formulate a motion. I guess I can take that next step unless somebody else has.
Can we ask a question to staff about the road diet? I mean, because you know the budgets and the constraints there. I mean, is it something that's possible with the budget and the timelines? Because I don't want to jinx it, so.
Or perhaps some supplemental budget that could be added on the local front.
Thank you for the question. Again, Ed Orango, Assistant Public Works Director. I do appreciate the enthusiasm to try to maximize the improvements along this corridor. Staff is very much in tune with improvements to corridors as much as possible as we can. This specific case is really unique. We have a federal grant that we're very hesitant to reopen the door for the federal government to reevaluate any changes we have on this corridor because it's a federal grant. We have cost constraints. This is a matching grant, so the city is contributing a significant amount of funding. We are really constrained on paving funding, which is where this funding is coming from. Our pavement condition index, which is a rating that we get on all our pavement. You're going to hear Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer. He's next up to bat to give you an update of where we are on our pavement program. We are behind on our pavement program. Our PCI has been dropping. And last year we got a report that identified it as 67. On a scale of 100, it doesn't sound great. We're really trying to get at 70 or above is really our goal. But we don't have a funding program for our payment program that funds it enough even to maintain our existing PCI. So fundamentally, our PCI is just going to continue dropping and we are never going to catch up. So we have at council last night, I don't know if you heard, but they were evaluating the strategic priorities and the work plan for the next 2 years. And one of those items is evaluating how to raise the PCI for the city up to 71. It will require some significant trade-offs because we don't have a new funding source. And the funds from other projects that require unrestricted funds. So these are the facility projects. These are the bike and ped projects. We'll have to get redirected to the payment program to raise our PCI. There are really going to be some significant trade-offs. So when you're asking for a road diet, I completely understand. It makes absolute sense. But I would, if the committee were to make a motion to have us consider a road diet, staff can consider it. Our initial take is that we would have to tell the CTC, which is our next stop, the Council Transportation Committee, that there is a significant risk to losing the funding and not meeting the requirements for the federal grant if we were to change the scope. It would something I would have to notify them of. And whether or not we need to take that to council for them to make a full decision on the council is we would need to evaluate that. But it is a decision that we could make by ourselves. It's a significant risk and we would need to go in with eyes wide open and council recognizing that we could lose the funding if we change the scope or not have enough funding for the additional improvements that are requested. Generally, a road diet, once you pave the road, it is painting. It's straightforward. It's the process that we need to go through the federal government on to reopen the scope of work and reevaluate the project again. That's our concern. If we had unlimited time, then great. Let's reopen the scope. It's really the significance of where we are at with the relook at federal funds and getting our PCI up. This is a paving project as well. In addition to, we're just trying to deliver the project within the project budget as well. We want to be sure that we're not adding elements that's going to drive the project and take away funding from other paving projects. So I hope that gives some context.
That's to me.
Can just to clarify in my head, when you talk about raising the scope, when we did the initial grant application, we wrote, staff wrote that a description of the project that it was bike lanes, sidewalk gap.
That is correct. So before you tonight is the consistent scope that when we first were initiating the grant application, we went to BPAC and said, here's the scope of work that we were planning on doing. We think this is a good project. Get some matching funds, would be competitive. We got support from BPAC. We went to council. Also, they said, that sounds great. And we were very successful in this. So we're very fortunate to do that. So changing the scope would require other levels of approval to make sure that we're.
Right. So it's kind of like a Brown Act where you can wiggle around inside of the declared scope of bike lanes and sidewalk gap, but to do a different thing would be a different scope. Any different kind of thing that can't be reasonably called a bike lane or a sidewalk gap would need to be going back to what OBAG or whatever.
Correct. Yeah, we would have to go back. Any change of scope, we have to go back to them. So here's where we're changing scope, and this is how we're funding it.
Mm-hmm.
So not only do we need to demonstrate that we have a change of scope, so they can look at it. It's okay. How does this change the funding? If we're staying within the funding budget, then that's one thing. If we're exceeding it, then they're saying, this is how much money you have. How are you coming to the table with city funds in order to close the gap that you've increased the scope based on additional improvements?
Mm-hmm.
So it's twofold. You're opening the door to reevaluating the project. And two, if you're adding improvements, how are you identifying the gap to provide the additional funding to install those improvements?
Okay.
I had a couple of follow-on questions. First off, can anyone clarify? In the case that the city were to want to do a road diet, who would actually be approving that? That it's been mentioned that it's federal funding in the end, but at the same time, this grant process, to my understanding, went through MTC. Caltrans.
So there's two steps, again, at an angle. We would need city approval before we change the scope. So staff would look to council to authorize a change in scope before we would submit to Caltrans, who would then review the project with the scope change. And if they authorized it, and then it'd come back to us and say, your scope is authorized, or whatever comes out of the results of the federal review of the scope applications. And Caltrans has their hands are in it twice. They're managing the federal funding. So they're gonna need to review the entire project. Plus, so they're sort of the funding review arm of this, ensuring that we're meeting the requirements. And then there's a permitting arm, because we're crossing two Caltrans jurisdictions on Highway 85 and 101, and we're within their right of way. They have a permitting arm, so they're gonna be reviewing for permitting as well. So I just want to be clear, it's the funding arm that we're concerned about.
And
Because the funding actually comes through MTC. So they were the ones who reviewed the Complete Streets projects.
sorry, so it's funding that was allocated by the federal government.
Yes.
Goes into a Caltrans bucket that Caltrans is responsible for managing in some way. And then I assume our region, MTC was awarding the grants. And then review of any changes would go, well, if the city and city council wanted to make the changes, review of any changes would go through MTC and Caltrans predominantly?
I think review of changes goes through MTC. But because this is at a Caltrans facility, then they're also.
They're permitting,
Very close to
their permitting side of things for us, so.
It may be Caltrans, because once we receive grant award.
Yeah.
The state administers the grant process in the implementation phase, so.
Okay.
For now, our coordination is with Caltrans to review design and adherence to what we are authorized to do as part of what we submitted in the application.
No, I was just gonna add to Joy's comment and Ed's comment also, just from the grant perspective, yes, MTC, the funds flow through MTC. But like Joy said, there is a twofold on top of what Ed was saying. Any change to the scope has to be approved by Caltrans, because they are the managing and review authority of the project. And then it has to, once the city process is complete, to Caltrans to review the scope changes, and eventually to MTC for their MTC board to approve, and then back to the federal. So it's a multi-step process, and it's only from the grant perspective that I'm clarifying that information.
Okay, and then the purpose of the grant money that this is coming from is for street safety, or for, broadly speaking,
Complete Streets.
complete streets, okay. And then I guess my other question would be, is it possible for us to ask whether this might be reasonable of anyone? Like, I realize that's different from actually getting approval for a scope change, but there are presumably people in these other organizations that can tell us whether such a scope change would be reasonable.
We certainly have contacts with both MTC and Caltrans. We can pose the question, but I would suspect that they would not have a confident answer on what the crystal ball is going to look like if they opened up this scope and reevaluate. Okay, we can certainly ask the question. Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you for being so patient. This is helpful. I guess I'm thinking now about time for the scope can change, because it has to go to MTC, has to go to council, and then it goes through that whole process that Jamie just asked about. How much time are we talking for that whole process? 9 months, a year?
2 days.
Maybe longer.
6 to 9 months.
Yeah, I would expect it to be conservatively, it'd be 6 to 9 months.
And we wouldn't even start the new design until the scope is.
Correct. Yeah, yeah, we would want to get approval that they moved the scope pages forward before initiating and spending design funding on doing it.
So we would really like this to be done next year with the paving.
Right, and when we say with the paving, we're doing the paving as a component of the project. It's all being done at one time.
Paving needs the money as well.
We need to actually pave. That's sort of the critical infrastructure need on condition of payment. And whenever we do any type of changes to the roadway, it's a good opportunity, as you're, have outlined, to relook at some reconfiguration. And so as we were identifying the project to repave, we can bring in the protected bikeways here. That was the intent.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, I understand the scope, and it's clear it was limited bike and pedestrian improvements for the goal of safety. A road diet wasn't specifically mentioned and traffic flows weren't specifically mentioned. So changing the lane configuration seems to be still potentially satisfying the original scope. Now, the current design is 4 lanes instead of 2. There's nothing that indicates there's traffic issues or congestion or volumes that warrant the 4 lanes. We just didn't think to do that in advance. I guess I'm disappointed. And going forward, we should be looking at any repaving project. We should have some traffic counts or some idea whether a road diet is feasible well in advance of the proposal. So I guess I want to move toward, and again, I think Engineer Chen said there's ongoing discussion and there can be discussions. That doesn't hurt. And I think we should have that discussion and push the decision to some extent up to the Council Transportation Commission that I'd like to make a motion that there is recognition of the BPAC for the timeline and the need to move this forward with the bike and pedestrian improvements that have been proposed. But there's disappointment and the need to discuss traffic volumes and a road diet. And if the opportunity to save money for median changes offsets the design changes for a road diet, I think we should have that discussion and find out from MTC if more safety is a good thing, given the known benefits of road diets. And again, there's no indication that Caltrans traffic flow would be impeded given what we've seen anecdotally. So I guess.
This is a very long motion.
Okay, so can I help me formulate that motion?
I tried to summarize it.
Yes, let's
So,
summarize it.
so would BPAC request that the city evaluate a road diet for the Moffett Boulevard Complete Streets project, given the low anecdotal traffic volumes on the road and high potential for safety improvements from said project. I'm not sure whether it's worth including anything in the motion that would be about like we understand there's some risk to like what we could do in terms of project scope and whatnot. But I think that they captured the core of the desire.
Yeah, I think the core is we want this evaluated at some level in some way. Yeah. I guess we're to some extent disappointed that it hadn't been done in advance. And there's no intention to jeopardize the overall time frame, as it were. And sometimes monies are found, and like I said, there could be offsets if we start that discussion that come up. So I think you've captured it well, James.
Okay, can I repeat that back? So
Yes.
BPAC requests that the city or that staff evaluate staff, is that city? The
Is there a
city,
difference?
maybe I'll say the city, evaluate the potential for a road diet for Moffat Complete Streets project, given the apparent low traffic volumes and high potential safety benefits. Chair Barton, you had also mentioned something about counts. Was that supposed to be in the?
Oh, yeah, I did not specifically request traffic counts in that motion. I don't know if we care about requesting that in the motion.
Maybe it's all.
If they're not needed and anecdotal is good enough, we don't need to mention counts.
Okay, so
Is that okay?
so I'm making that motion, I guess. It would be in order to have a second, I think.
Can I just suggest an alternative? Just to sound it out, like an alternative would be to recommend staff proceed as is with just an expression of disappointment that the road diet was not considered.
I would want it much stronger.
Yeah, I want the word, request to
I
evaluate.
just wanted to, sound it out.
So and I'm more in line with what you suggest, and I think we can express of these appointments, stronger or things like this, but to be asking for additional studies, that's going to be delays no matter how. And with the funding, I think it can put the whole project at risk. So, this is also staff time, that's needed on the projects, and I don't think they have planned to do that study of a road diet. So,
Well, I think staff is working on this. Again, I have no intent of delaying, but I'd like the discussion to include some evaluation. Now, how extensive, that's kind of up to staff at this point, but I think I'd like the word, not just a disappointment, but the request for some evaluation of feasibility and trade-offs.
I guess if we theoretically push on a road diet and it goes through and they do all this process, that could take longer than this project being completed as is. Right? We could theoretically have these in next year, or we could still be discussing the possibility of a road diet at the end of 2026.
Mhm.
So given constraints, I guess what I would like to ask for is that complete project as designed, but include design for road diet. So the design's done in the future.
But so I guess there's a couple of things here for me. One is, it's not obvious to me how much more. First off, the motion as I crafted was not overly specific, for better or for worse, about how much evaluation we're asking for. We have the ad hoc evaluation from Assistant Director Arango, but there's that. There's also though that, well, first, I don't know how we can ask, but including simultaneously designing two separate projects doesn't strike me as something that's going to result in cost savings. And also it would be absurd to me if we did not spend some resources as a city to ask the question of if this is reasonable, like of ourselves and potentially of MTC. Like it's a major potential benefit to safety. It's a project that in all likelihood, seeing how capital projects tend to work, will be what's there for at least the following decade, if not two. It's not.
How about we ask that in the motion that staff bring a road diet and all the details about what that would entail before MTC when they present.
That sounds like a more specific, that sounds
I guess.
More
that's-
substantial than the motion I made.
Yes, so long. So not, I was talking about council transportation committee. So I just, I think, our recommendation is, I believe we want to stick to the time frame.
Mhm.
We want some level of evaluation to see if there's trade-offs and opportunities here. That's kind of vague, but I think we want to express that. And if winds are favorable, maybe something actually happens. If winds are unfavorable, and the idea has to be stopped for the time frame, that's okay too. But I think I'd like to express our, a little bit displeasure that we didn't get much consideration of a road diet. We should take at this late date what we can do and at least evaluate it based on our input.
Okay,
I don't need a full second design. I don't want to jeopardize the time frame.
maybe I misunderstood your original motion. Are you asking for what I was trying to say? I don't want to delay, but I want a realistic look at it and see if it's realistic and present it to CTC.
Effectively, yes, I don't know how substantial it is, but yes. So I think we.
So I don't want to derail I want to add a little bit, just a couple things to keep in perspective. One, we can reach out to MCC. MCC typically is the agency that is most supportive of locals, but they also can give you a good perspective on where that tipping point is and where that line is with in regard to asking Caltrans. Caltrans also has direction from the head Federal Highway Administration. We don't know the nature of those most recent directions from FHWA. So it seems clear to us and almost absurd to not ask the question. But the further we get away from the logic of this, the more risk we might be. So you get that. The perspective. Second, you guys have another swing at the bat here with the active transportation plan. So all of the evaluation you're asking for doesn't need to fall back onto this particular project. It doesn't necessarily mean that we would have to wait for the next pavement cycle. If the ATP dictates and if the ATP results in this being a very high level of priority, you get to see the whole canvas of priorities for the city and decide where the additional improvements would lay afterwards. So you get to see this phase implemented and to see how that performs while you decide while you are evaluating the ATP. Does that help?
Yeah. I think I was vague about evaluate.
Fair.
Evaluate might be a short discussion with MTC and they say, not happening. We evaluate it. If they say, we in Caltrans, we're looking for a similar road diet project, we could fast track that. That gives us a favorable win and maybe we have that next discussion. So I want to evaluate at whatever level of discussion, whether it's MTC, whether it's staff, at least people thinking and discussing it without endangering the time frame. And yes, it would be nice if it slips in and someone says, new CAD system for the design has AI, it's only a couple of clicks and we get the road diet button function in there and we can take a look. That's great. If that doesn't exist and it's too much budget, that's part of the evaluation.
Okay, can I hear the motion as stated again?
Okay, so BPAC requests that the city evaluate the potential for a road diet for Moffett Boulevard Complete Streets project, given the low apparent traffic volumes and high potential safety benefits. And I also heard some sort of intent that it includes exploration with MTC and keeping roughly within the time frame. But that's
Evaluate includes, I guess,
Okay.
staff's exploration. I don't think that needs to be in the motion, but keeping within the time frame is my intent in the motion.
I would like to potentially add I guess it's called a friendly amendment here, saying we do not want to delay the project.
Yes.
okay. So noting at the end,
Sorry, I'm just thinking I'll be honest, personally, I would take a couple months of delay of the project to get the meaningful safety improvements. If that were legitimately the trade-off.
Okay, so, yeah.
It's like, I don't.
I guess delay here
Substantially.
meaning stay within.
Yeah.
Stay within the grant timeline.
Yeah, endangering, no endangerment of the grant.
With, as long as there's no risk of exceeding the grant time. I don't even want to get to the edge.
A question on the process, after this meeting, what is the next step in, does it go to CTC or, I mean, just so that we know, so. And what's,
We are going to the CTC next week,
Next
next
week?
Tuesday.
next Tuesday?
Yeah, so if we want something discussed, then we discuss,
Sure, so
motion.
I think that would be more like something for them to consider, and then they are the ones who will decide anyway,
Yeah.
if, what the parameters of evaluation would be, so maybe it's a recommendation to CTC to consider, a road diet.
Sorry, can you read back
Okay.
the motion?
BPAC requests that the city evaluate the potential for a road diet for Moffat Boulevard Complete Streets project, given the low apparent traffic volumes and high potential safety benefits, noting that BPAC does not wish to substantially delay the project or endanger the grant funding.
Yes, I am.
Who's the
Can I
motioner?
second here?
I am making that motion.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
fine, okay.
Yes,
Can I ask a friendly amendment to also tag the suggested improvements to the crossings?
So I was going to do a second motion with, like, there are a few smaller improvements we requested that I was just going to try to list out as a laundry list as a second motion, independent of this, since this one's the more substantial one.
Yeah.
So.
I would support that second motion.
So,
I think I want the main
so
motion. to be-
let's get this in order.
okay, I can second Chair Barton's motion.
Are we ready for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I'm going to attempt, so I'm going to try to list the smaller improvements that we mentioned that I don't think are controversial, but if they are, we could separate them out or something. So I move that BPAC also recommends moving right turn on red lanes to moving right turn lanes to the left of the bike lanes, and or eliminating right turns with lanes by adding no right turn on red at intersections. Adding a curb cut from the northbound Stevens Street Trail to northbound Moffett to ease the.
Sorry, can you say that again? The second part?
Adding a additional curb cut from northbound Stevens Street Trail to northbound Moffett to make the bicycle movements there safer. Evaluate a new pedestrian crossing across Moffett Boulevard, just south of the 85 southbound on-ramp. Narrowing the left lane in each direction to the standards provided for by NACTO. And evaluating improvements to crosswalks, including improved lighting, stop bars that are in advance of the crosswalk. And did I miss anything there?
Check the ADA ramps.
And evaluating the and ensuring all curb cuts are ADA compliant. Sorry, I think, okay. And was there anything in there that requires significant further discussion?
I think there was one more,
Oh.
that's improving the lighting and the visibility in the
Yeah,
underpass.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, I mentioned lighting for crosswalks. I was not, you were talking about under 85. Oh.
Yeah.
And improving the lighting under the State Route 85 underpass.
Okay, can we
There
add
were some-
without jeopardizing the timeline or?
Yeah, I think there were some.
The project.
Yeah, I think I used some words along the lines that basically recommend there, but yeah, and without with the same caveat at the end about substantial delay or jeopardizing grant funding. And if you have that down, if you could read it back, read it.
Oh,
since it
yeah, yeah.
probably
So I
made it
think
sound
I
better.
missed one. Okay, so BPAC recommends one, moving right turn lanes to the left of the bike lane or eliminating, hang on, is that right?
Or
To
eliminate.
the right of the bike lane.
No. If they're to the right of the bike lane, that means the cars cross the bike lane, right?
So moving the right turn lane to the,
So they're currently on the right of the bike lane, forcing the cars to cross the bike lane when they go to make the right turn.
no, the right turn vehicle lane.
What? Sorry, we may be confusing what refers to right.
Moving the vehicular right turn lane.
Yes. Yeah, move the bike lane to be next to the curb. Yes, that
The
is a,
bike lane next to the curb.
yes. Sorry. So if we pull, can we pull one of the diagrams just to make absolutely sure we're all talking about the
Do you
same thing?
wanna pull your design?
Yeah, no, I think that.
So we have it in segments.
Should have the left side.
I'm clear on the comment.
On the what, sorry?
On the comment that was made.
Uh-huh.
The request to move the right turn lanes to the left of the bike lane at the intersection. Staff is clear on that comment.
Yeah, okay. Or eliminating the right turn slip lane by adding a no right turn on red.
Yes.
Secondly,
Yes.
oh, maybe I missed something. So maybe this is thirdly, adding an additional curb cut from Stevens Creek.
No, that was the second thing I said.
Oh, okay, adding an additional curb cut from Stevens Creek Trail northbound to Moffett northbound in order to improve safety. And third thing I had was, oh, evaluating a new crosswalk. Sorry, this is the
Yeah.
part that I missed. Where was
Yeah,
this?
evaluate a new pedestrian crosswalk, just south of the 85 southbound on ramp, where the crosswalk
Oh,
would cross
okay.
Moffett Boulevard.
Where the current sidewalk ends.
Yes, and remembering I have seen multiple people walk under that side because of exactly the reason.
Okay, and then the fourth thing is narrowing the lanes to.
So assuming we had no road diet, can we narrow the
Yeah.
left lane in each direction in accordance with the standard the members?
Narrowing the left lanes to NECDO
It is
standards.
the left lane that you narrow in that case, right?
DIB 95 specifies, but NACTO doesn't, but I think it's right, yes, the right lane is the one that trucks and buses mostly use, so the left lane is the one that they usually narrow.
And then evaluating crossing improvements, including ADA, actually maybe it's including crossing improvements, including ADA compliant curb cuts, advanced stop bars, and improved lighting. Oh, and then one more, and improving lighting under State Route 85.
Yes. I think that's all the things I listed. Is there anything in there that's involves controversy among the pack? I include them all because I didn't think they would, but I don't want to pursue that.
So the extra crossing, I think to me, the proper solution would be to have a sidewalk on the other side.
Oh, do you want to
space.
turn that into an or? So
But I mean, and that's not gonna happen now.
That's the one
but
that would
it's,
require significant alterations to the State Route 85
Well,
structure, is that right?
I'm not suggesting we do it, I'm just saying that this is the proper solution.
Well, and I think, sorry, let me ask just for confirmation, why are we not doing considering closing the sidewalk gap on the southbound side of Moffett under State Route 85?
It does include or involve extensive coordination with Caltrans,
Yeah.
because and then just as a reminder for everyone in the room, most of our project limits is within the Caltrans jurisdiction. So while the road diet is a great idea, that would have to be approved by Caltrans. So it might involve a lot more extensive evaluation than just staff level. But yes, there's extensive work to be done in the undercrossing if we were to introduce a sidewalk.
Yeah, just making sure that was understood, since that was my understanding, but sorry, I was trying to add that.
Again, I can't not remind the fact that any additional scope elements are going to increase the project costs. So any concrete improvements will escalate the project costs. And we are concerned with just keeping the existing project as presented to BPAC at the project costs.
I think the goal of those items with the clause, did we include the clause about avoiding substantial delay in that one as well?
Oh, no.
Okay, can we?
I think we're talking about a wish list. at this
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I
Okay.
just wanted to be sure it was clear that adding any kind of sidewalk or concrete improvements beyond just
Yeah, I think the,
evaluation of the scope change would increase project costs, and we are
yeah,
concerned
for
about
the,
delivering project.
for closing that particular sidewalk gap, that matched, I think, certainly my understanding. I just wanted to make sure we had mentioned it on the record so that it wasn't an unstated assumption on our part.
I think we're just putting our wish list out there.
Sorry, so I think that was for the purposes of the motion, I don't see a need to add the or close that sidewalk gap because in my mind, that's a much more substantial scope increase than some of the other things. And so I don't see as much need to list it, although it is true that I would love someday to see that sidewalk gap closed. I would also love to.
I wasn't suggesting this. I mean,
Yeah.
again, I was just saying that the long term, this is
Yeah.
the proposed solution, and it may be that the extra crossings may be costing money, and it's better to do it later properly.
My editorial comment would also be that the extra crossings would be easier and safer if there was a road diet, but okay. I made that motion. I don't think anyone seconded it yet.
I have one question to staff.
Yeah.
When there is a right turn lane, what are there standards in Caltrans or NAFCO about when the bike is to the left and when it's to the right? I've seen both. Sometimes one seems to work better than the other, but is there a standard or is it case by case?
There are different design standards and from our design consultant, what we have proposed at Leong and Moffett is an acceptable intersection treatment. If there is another alternative we could consider, we are open to that if we want to move the location of the bike lane in relation to the right turn lane.
Okay, so our motion doesn't conflict good practices necessarily. It just says evaluate that movement. And so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, so I would personally, having biked that multiple times and quite recently, I would be significantly more comfortable if it were especially if there are no right turn on red. If I were just biking there and on next to the curb the whole time. So, okay, the motion's still out of order because there's still no second.
I will second the motion.
Can I have a final reading?
Yeah, that sounds
Okay,
appropriate.
BPAC recommends considering the following design elements without substantial cost increases. One, moving the right turn lane to the left of the bike lanes or eliminating the right turn slip lane by adding no right turn on red. Secondly, adding an additional curb cut from Stevens Creek Trail northbound to Moffett northbound to improve bike safety. Evaluating new crosswalk south of SR 85 on ramp. What are we up to? 4, narrowing the left turn lanes to the NACTO standards.
The left lane, they're
Oh,
not.
the left lane, sorry, to NACTO standards. And then adding crossing improvements, including ADA compliant curb cuts, advanced stop bars and improved lighting, and finally improved lighting under 85, State Route 85.
And then the final clause.
She included it at the start.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we have a second. Are we ready to call for a vote?
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yes.
If you could just add evaluate the new pedestrian crosswalk south of the southbound off-ramp would also include a crosswalk on Moffett. Was that?
Sorry, that was meant to be specifically a crosswalk across Moffett, just south of the on-ramp.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was not meant to be a crosswalk across the on-ramp. Which would be a different thing. And not much use with the current configuration. Yeah.
Are we ready to call for a vote? All in favor?
Ask who's opposed and abstained.
I'll just abstain.
Okay.
Okay, I think we are completed with the Moffett Boulevard discussion and ready to move on. Let's do that then, please.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item 6.2, presentation on the pavement management plan. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. Let's see if this works. Okay. Good evening, I'm Robert Gonzalez, Principal Civil Engineer. I will be providing an update on the city's pavement management program tonight. So the city owns and operates a 417-mile network of service. That seems a little high, but that's substantial. Street network, which serves all modes of transportation, pedestrians, cyclists, transit, motorists, and supports key services such as emergency response, deliveries, and trash collection. Making the streets safe and accessible for all is a priority for the pavement management program. So our outline tonight, we're going to be considering pavement condition categories and network condition. I'll be discussing how we develop the pavement management program, how pavement segments are selected for treatment, funding sources, as well as related elements, including public safety enhancements. So this table here shows the different pavement conditions. This is kind of established by by MTC. Most of the cities in the Bay Area use these same kind of categories. The PCI rating is a 100-point scale, 100 being newly paved pavement, and failing pavement is essentially anything in that kind of 50 or below category. Here it says PCI is 24. That's rather subjective. Once you get below 50, it's really difficult to differentiate terrible versus more terrible. But that's where we are. And so this is our network map. Our 3-year network PCI is city engineer Arango mentioned before was 67. We evaluate this every 2 or 3 years through a third party. So this is essentially a snapshot of every street segment in the city, and it gives us an overall barometer of pavement condition. The MTC Commission, they assist the cities and counties in the Bay Area by administering a third-party contract every couple of years. The contractor performs field examinations and provides us a pavement condition score for every street in the city. So the report helps us shed light on how different segments are deteriorating, which ones are holding up, and which ones are good candidates for treatment. So this graph here helps us in investment planning. It's one of my favorite slides. The graph illustrates very clearly that the pavement deterioration is nonlinear. So we have a honeymoon period at the very beginning of a pavement improvement where there's very little investment that needs to be made. The PCI stays relatively stable for about 4 or 5 years. Following that is a steep decline in quality around years 5 to 7. And then you can fairly predictably, it goes down from good to fair to poor in a matter of several years. So as you were saying before, for a full rehabilitation, it might be a 30-year lifetime. We do have tools to extend that lifetime by putting in slurry seals and protecting the pavement that we've put in place. So there's kind of a counterintuitive element to pavement management. One of the best ways to keep a pavement network in place is to keep the good streets in good condition. So we invest in slurry seals and cape seals and different types of seals that reduce oxygenation and surface wear. And that just keeps all of those things that are in the good to excellent condition in that range. If one were to invest in kind of a worst first approach where you're chasing after the poorest streets, you end up over investing in those streets, and then you lose the streets that are in the good condition. They kind of slip into that fair to poor condition. So it can be a dangerous slippery slope. How's that? So we also get information, since we know where all the streets are, we also get information on PCI by neighborhood. So we have here a snapshot to identify which neighborhoods need the most attention. Staff works to have a street project in 2 to 3 neighborhoods per year, and then we rotate across all of our neighborhoods. This is a snapshot of our active and planned projects for the next couple of years. This is on our city website. And new this year, we haven't shown this to you before, we actually had asked our consultant to evaluate our pavement trail condition. So the city owns and operates a 15.5 mile network of trails. And our path network PCI is 65 or in fair condition.
What are the colors?
So I think the ones that are owned by the city are in green. There's a lot of colors there.
Okay.
Why don't I get you a legend on those colors? 'Cause it's on the bottom left there, but I can't really read it.
The green says very good.
Oh, it is.
Oh, it's a
good.
condition.
There's two different yellows and they're very close in color.
How about we get you a better map? This was the one that consultant delivered to us, so we can ask this to be.
Orange is poor.
Yes, so the colors are the condition, green being good. Beyond that, we'll find a better way to illustrate them.
What is the purple, I guess? I don't know.
Pardon?
What is purple?
Purple, oh, that's the
Highways.
freeways.
Oh, okay.
Yes, don't.
I don't know why they were highlighted, that's all.
Right there.
Please. Let me give you a recap of our current funding situation here. So pavement projects are funded by a variety of local, regional, and state funding, sometimes federal funding. The state gas tax and SB1, along with VTA vehicle license fees and Measure B programs, all provide funding to the city for pavement maintenance. However, the revenues from these funding sources are not keeping up with the rising cost of paving projects. So we are slipping further down that curve. The gas tax revenue has been declining in actual value over the last several years and will continue to do so as we expect more gas-powered vehicles are replaced by electrics and hybrids. In addition, some of these funding sources are intended for other types of transportation improvements. So the net available pavement maintenance has been further declining. The funding sources for pavement maintenance have been further declining. We just have a lot of competing interests over those sources. So you can see on the left is the transportation funds, and on the right is the unrestricted funds. So the unrestricted funds are a different story, and these consist of the CIP reserve and the construction and conveyance tax. These are two local funding sources. So they're competing along other types of projects such as city facility capital maintenance needs and sustainability improvements, bike and ped projects, parks major maintenance projects, and regulatory requirements are all projects that are competing for unrestricted funds along with pavement maintenance. Oh, look at that. There we go. Okay, unrestricted. And then we've got, in addition to that, so we have some other items that are also pull away from paving maintenance. So one of the easiest ways for us to deliver street improvements, transportation improvements, is to deliver pavement striping along with our paving projects. It's just a natural fit. But when we do that, we're either pulling from transportation funds or we're pulling from payment funds to deliver those. And then on top of that, here we have protected intersections, and then we also have stormwater elements that we could also deliver as we're improving on our streets. Those also would be pulling from street funds unless we can find funds to supplement that. So all of these are pressures that the paving program feels when we're looking for funding to pave our streets. So I think this just adds into the narrative that the Assistant Public Works Director Arango was mentioning earlier about how challenging it can be to find the paving funding that we need. So here we have a table of PCI. I think this is, so the bar graph shows pavement investment, past pavement investment. So pre-2020, we were in the $6 to $7 million range. And then that fell to $5 million around the pandemic. And we rebounded somewhat to about $5.8 million per year. And then this is our PCI graph. So we could see that it was, if you look over to the right, you can see that it was in the low 70s. And then it declined down to 67 now. So we anticipate this to continue to decline. We simply don't have the funding to maintain the funding. On the right-hand side, you can see that we've got a $5.8 million budget. We need about $8 million annually to maintain the PCI. And we would need about $14 million over the next 5 years in order to see that PCI increase to by 5 points. So Measure B and SB1 both have a threshold. They would like, as a goal, they'd like to see the network PCI at 70 or above. That gives us additional latitude for Measure B funding. It allows us to spend that on elements that are not related directly to pavement. We can put it in striping, we can put in road diets, we can put in other transportation improvements if we maintain a minimum PCI of 70. So we're chasing that at this point.
Sorry, can you repeat the number that you mentioned for how much it would approximately to get it up by 5 points?
Yeah, so on the right there, it's 14
I'm sorry.
million annually for 5 years. I'm not going to do the math for you.
Yeah. No, I hadn't seen those on the slide.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's no problem.
Sorry, oh, and that's a total number, not in addition to the projected number, or is that in addition to projected?
That is a total number, not in addition to the baseline. Thank you. Staff is available for questions.
Okay, clarifying questions from committee members.
So I have one, but maybe I should have asked earlier. I mean, how do you determine the average?
The PCI?
Yeah.
So it is a very manual operation. So somebody who is trained goes out and for a street segment, say 3 blocks of California, they identify what they consider a representative sample, not the worst, not the best, but a representative area of the street. And they take a wheel and they will measure every single crack in the pavement, and they will measure areas of defects. So whether that's a depressed pavement or alligator cracking or whatnot, and they score them. So every piece of pavement might start at 100, and then they will score lower than that based on every single defect that they see in the pavement. So for example, something that has a lot of weathering, it could be very smooth. It might not have a lot of cracks in it. It might be, instead of 100, it might be 85, simply because you can identify the oxidation. Other ones will be, like I said, the crack sealing, with measuring them all out. So they take that representative and they score that section based on that measurement. And then they simply continue to do that for every single segment of street in the city. And we get a score at the end of the summer. It takes 3 months of doing this in a city, and that's just for our city. I don't know how long, San Jose.
So this is for the average for streets, but how do you come up with the average for the network, I guess?
Oh, so every single segment is provided a score, and then you average it out. So I can't remember if it's averaged out by square footage or by lane mile. I'd have to go back and double check that, but I believe it's square footage. So
not all streets are equal, I guess.
not all streets are equal. So a residential street that's narrower doesn't have the same weight as a Ringsdorf that's 4 lanes plus bike lanes.
Additional questions? Stone?
Go ahead. Okay, I'm curious. So we have the same funding, but where our PCI is going down. Do you think that there's more wear and tear, or is it just the costs are rising for doing the maintenance work?
The costs are rising for doing the maintenance work. Wear and tear is something that I hear a lot of concern about. Vehicles are getting heavier. There's more SUVs on the road. Most of the wear and tear, so surface wear and tear is age, oxidation. Base wear and tear from the bottom up is often load bearing. But if load bearing often means buses.
Mhm.
It often means garbage trucks. So those carry a lot more base repair effects than even the largest SUV. So we generally measure it out in trip volume. But a lot of times what you'll see is, especially if you drive around a cul-de-sac and you'll see the crack pavement like in a circular fashion, that's exactly where the tread line is for the trash solid waste delivery vehicles.
Yeah, right. Okay. Do you have any idea what the cost is per square foot, or to put it another way, is it cheaper when the lanes are narrower? I'm thinking about like an old Mountain View, for example. On one side of Calderon, there's mostly street trees, which extend out and make the actual paved area smaller. Is that cheaper to maintain than on the other side where they're like 38-foot with no green treatments at all?
38-foot, like curb to curb.
38-foot curb to curb versus like 34-foot with like.
Some of those are under 30-foot curb to curb too.
Yeah, 30-foot or even 25, right? Some of them are as narrow as 25 with 8-foot medians. That's a lot less pavement, so it seems like it would be cheaper.
Yes, so there's balancing acts there. There's competing costs on both sides. One, you're right, the straight bid amount that you would get from a contractor is on a square foot basis. So if you're doing a slurry seal, it is a pass from a large truck with staff around there kind of mopping it up and evening it out. That is done on a square foot basis. But a contractor will also go out and observe the street and get a sense of how challenging it could be. So if there's a lot of medians in the street, they may change the price just based on mobilization. Like they may have to mobilize a smaller vehicle if they can't fit it into a narrower lane. But I mean, that's an exception. Calderon, you're thinking about the narrowest of streets in the city. If I were to go to a different neighborhood and it's pretty clean, then yeah, I would say that all things being
else
equal,
a 30-foot curb to curb would be about 75% the cost of a 40-foot curb to curb.
yeah, whatever that fraction is, that's exactly right.
Yeah, okay. Those are my questions.
Member Adamic?
Yes, I was wondering, since we get this, by presenting to us the difficulty of funding, maintaining pavement quality, what do you hope to get from the committee?
So this presentation is probably about 3 years old. So really, this is to the benefit of your newest member. But when we started this, we wanted to simply lay out how staff evaluated and treated pavement. Right, it's how we pick the streets. There was a logic to it. There was a programmatic approach to it. We do it neighborhood by neighborhood. This is how we invest the public's money. So I added the funding slides really for perspective. So I'm not looking for any specific actions on that part. If you want to vote for Measure G, that was last fall. Hopefully.
Yeah, okay.
I believe we asked for updates periodically and
Yes.
this is satisfying.
Yeah, we asked for these updates about 4 or 5 years ago, and we've gotten them.
I had one more question. So
I also had more questions.
sorry, you can go ahead. Sorry.
So I think in one of these previous ones, I had suggested incorporating fees into things that contribute to pavement degradation, like maybe part of the garbage fee would fund to offset the damage by garbage trucks, or new developers, if they have a lot of cement mixers or debris haulers or whatever, like there would be a fee. I was wondering if that was ever considered or tried.
No, we have not tried that. I will have to be
That was
very
my guess.
creative. I will have to be very creative in justifying that fee.
So, yeah, no and yes is sort of the answer here. Not on the solid waste side for the large garbage trucks. There isn't a fee that we've explored on that side. On the construction side, when there is a construction tax that community development collects for permits that get issued for construction.
Mhm.
So it's a small amount, but there is, and it's the tax was established many years ago, and so it's very low.
Okay.
It's something that as a city, we need to start exploring on identifying reevaluating the amount of tax that we collect for construction. That being said, that tax was specifically passed by the voters, so it would mean we'd have to go back to the voters who wanted to increase it.
Okay, thanks. And then you can just tell me if this is out of scope, but I was reading that because it's not about pavement, it's about cleaning, that Sunnyvale hadn't built protected bike lanes because of the difficulty of sweeping lanes. How does Mountain View do it?
So currently we have a small number of protected lanes. And we're as a service, we're paying a third party with a smaller sweeper to get into those lanes and sweep them. So I don't know, I've never seen it. I believe it gets done because they're relatively clean occasionally. As we grow our network of protected bike lanes, we may invest in our own vehicles. But for now, we're actually paying.
And would
a
that
third
be
party.
the same budget or different budget from pavement?
Oh, from pavement, different budget from pavement. Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Palo Alto has a nice narrow street sweeper. I see it every other week.
So you pretty much asked part of my questions on this, but specifically, did we get any money from all the construction work that happened at McKelvey? Because, you know, I can guarantee you that the poor quality of Miramonte, that's because of this.
So to answer your question, did we receive any funding from the McKelvey construction project?
Yeah, per that tax or.
Yeah, the tax is focused on development construction.
Oh, so that's not a.
Yeah, and we don't, when the city does construction projects, we don't tax ourselves for that work.
And yes, I guess that was the water district.
And we don't, there's no tax on construction activity done by other public entities or private entities that are public serving, such as PG&E, AT&T, et cetera.
That was a lot of dirt to bowl. And my second question is, I don't know if you were, but Los Altos, I think it was last year, looked into applying a different kind of priority to the repavement. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, where, you know, because they pretty much decided that the average will never be higher because, you know, you kind of, that's a kind of a whack-a-mole, right? So things like this. So they decided to kind of prioritize certain streets that are part of their, I guess, safe route to schools or high priority safety streets to set up as a priority. So is it something that you're aware of or is it something that could be applied or maybe via the active transportation?
I've seen other communities do that. My first response to that would be is if that were the case, there would be streets in Mountain View that would never get treated. And that's just a trade-off that the community has to make.
And for Los Altos, it may be a plus because then it's more rural, right? But it's,
I didn't say it.
I live next to it, I can say.
Yeah, so that's not something that I would recommend. I would, if given that direction, we can certainly go in that direction. But I don't like the idea of a street never having an opportunity to actually get paved because it's not a safe route to school or a recommended route to school.
Is it something contemplated in the transportation plan or?
No.
But how to prioritize
Well, so
your repavements or?
We prioritize, so for example, both the Moffat Complete Streets and the Middlefield Complete Streets, the OBAG grant provided complete streets improvements and some paving funds. And the reason we went for those corridors was because they are priorities. So in that sense, when we're looking for grants and the grants also augment paving funding, then there is a little bit of that factors into it.
Any further, James?
Yeah, first I was curious, I think since the last time this was shown to us, the aforementioned evaluation of the pavement index did occur, and I feel like I remember that being a relatively new contractor to us. I was just curious how that went, if we got any important learnings from that, the evaluating the pavement index this time around.
I was satisfied with their work. They are often loaded with a big contract, say City of San Jose, they make a lot of money there. And then that's balanced out with smaller cities that if they were to not be part of this group, they'd have a hard time actually I guess even getting the forces out there to actually do the work. So this is a good way for MTC to manage all of the contracts and give all of the cities kind of the benefit of having a very qualified third-party contractor. MTC does a professional selection process just like we would, but they do it on a larger scale. So in terms of timing, in terms of quality of work, I think it's been consistent and satisfying quality.
I guess the next question I was gonna ask is just, is there any, how do we compare to, in terms of both our current pavement quality and what we're spending on, how we're managing the pavement to peer cities, for whatever a reasonable definition of peer cities is?
Yeah, I don't have that information on the slide deck, but if you go online, MTC does an annual pothole report. So I think if you just search for MTC pothole report, it may be dated. Sometimes they don't come out very frequently. There's a table, top to bottom, all the good cities, all the fair cities, all the below average cities, top to bottom. So we are in line with a Milpitas, with San Jose. We're probably in line with Fremont or Union City. We are not in line with Campbell.
And as a general rule, are we spending similar amounts of money and resources to some of those other cities? Or
I only have anecdotal evidence on that.
I take on the question. Okay.
Member Dominic?
I was just wondering, so now that we know that some of the trails are the pavement's in poor condition, is that still then with parks and a separate budget, or is that now part of the pavement program?
It's a separate budget. We did the assessment because we had the tools, we had the consultant. So we funded the assessment, and then we had a meeting with CSD to let them know that it's still in their purview to invest in improvements, and they do have a budget for that.
Okay, so it might actually be an advantage, maybe.
Well, it helps them, right? That's a snapshot. It helps them to see where the issues are and where the concerns are, and it gives them a chance to programmatically approach the problem.
Okay, thanks.
And one final newbie questions, I'm sure, everybody knows this, but, I guess it's funded via gas proceeds, right? So, the pavements. How is it allocated per city? Is it based on the number of
Right. So we have
miles that we have, or is it by capita, or?
We have a lot of different funding sources. So some of them are based on population. I don't think any of them are based on the number of lane miles or anything like pavement. I think it's a straight population figure. I'd have to go back and double check that. But we have gas tax, we have Measure B, we have SB1. All of these have different formulas, but a lot of them are based on like census tracts.
Seeing no further questions from members, going to questions from members of the public.
We have two speakers online. Bruce England, you may unmute yourself.
Thanks, Aruna. You'll hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, Bruce England, Wisman Station Drive. So I usually bring this up when this topic comes up, but as a bicyclist myself and a lot of you are bicyclists too. You have that experience of seeing that the roadway for vehicles is more or less okay, but the bike lane is not. And for example, where I tend to ride, which is near where I live, but across town is like North Wisman Road down to South Wisman Road leading to Dana and then along Dana and Calderon like that, which gets me into the downtown area. And the bikeway has been really crummy along that west side of North Wisman, South Wisman for years and years and years. And yet it never shows up. And I suspect that it's because the roadway itself is in decent shape. But when you're biking along there, it's not a comfortable experience at all. The asphalt is really crumbling and there are seams all along there and everything. And then along Dana, the white lane divider for the bike lane is practically gone in a lot of places along there. And now I'm seeing that the green bikeway markings on Calderon, which are not that old, near Dana, so Dana Calderon, that intersection, they're practically gone. And then we've got the green lane markings on Shoreline going southbound to Villa Street, which is also not very old, and yet it's cracking away. It seems like it's the underlying pavement even that's giving way, not the paint or the covering surface. And then, of course, we have to deal with all the debris that tends to land in the bike lane. So all the wood screws and the broken glass and who knows what that lands over there. It's not inviting to people who might choose to get on their bikes and bike around at a time when we want active transportation to be promoted, both in through the active transportation plan, but also just through infrastructure improvements and so on. And so it's not clear to me that when we're looking at keeping the road surfaces up to snuff, that we're really taking into account what I'm describing, that the bikeways themselves might not be in good shape. And I would like to know how that's differentiated when the consultant goes out and measures the roadways. Are they really taking that distinction into account, or are they just taking a sample on the roadway where the vehicles are and measuring there? I know you can't normally answer these questions, and I might do an Ask Mountain View on it, but I did want to raise these points here now. Thanks.
Additional members of the public?
Yes, Celia Paymer, you may unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Celia Paymer. Again, about 15-year resident of Mountain View. And I think I've seen the same presentation at least 3 times now between CTC and BPAC and other meetings. And the only thing that changes is that the active and planned projects map seems to constantly postpone the projects. And so my question is, why is this happening? What's the cause? These are projects that are often already fully approved and funded, and yet get delayed by sometimes years. For instance, Miramani, the last time on the map, it was supposed to be 2024 summer, and now it's next year. And when I look at that map, it's what we got, maybe like 5, 6 tiny blocks paved this year. So I guess that means we have a lot of funding for next year. The majority of it is El Camino, which was done by Caltrans. So I'm just curious where are the projects happening? Because on that map, they didn't happen this year. And then also in considering the increased costs, shouldn't we look at as many road diets as possible to bring the cost down? If we could reduce that square footage, it would also reduce our costs. So I think I'm surprised that staff isn't advocating for more road diets to reduce that cost. And if we could add green elements, especially ones that residents possibly maintain, it seems like we could reduce the costs even more by having residents maintain those areas. I also agree with the commissioners that we should look at construction fees. We saw a large amount of degradation caused by the Caltrans trucks on Barbara Ave. They repaired all their cuts on Miramani, but did not repair any of the damage on Barbara Ave. So maybe we should consider fees on public entities, as it's not the city's jobs to subsidize for-profit companies like PG&E, and then nonprofits, even like the water district, should still be responsible for their impact. If there is a tax on development, we need it to be higher because construction is currently externalizing their financial impacts onto our communities. Thank you.
That's all.
Okay, seeing no further comments on Zoom, any members of the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to committee comments.
Oh, We have one more.
Oh, okay, we, go ahead, but with the member of the public, please.
April, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo what Celia had to say about reducing lanes and asphalt and having the benefit from seeing less road that we actually have to maintain, in addition to all the other benefits we have, and seeing an extended pavement life due to lower traffics and volumes and speeds. And then also, I've seen a couple of studies that reference how having shade over asphalt can actually expand increase pavement life up to sometimes like 50-60%. I'm not sure about this, but I would love to see staff maybe explore some of these options. And thank you. That's it.
No further members of the public, committee comments? James?
Yeah, first off, it would be lovely if that trail PCI map were us on that same website that has the overall PCI. I hope that's a simple request. The other one is just sort of in the vein of what some of the public commenters were getting at. I'd be interested to understand what the magnitude of different types of, what sorts of things impact the underlying costs of doing this. Like, are there interventions the city should be looking at in terms of, I was not aware of there being any studies around, shade increasing pavement lifespan. But the obvious one that always comes up in these situations with an entity like BPAC is, well, if we reduce the asphalt square footage, but I don't know that that would actually be a meaningful impact on the situations we're looking at. There's also things that I'm always somewhat curious about like, in terms of land use planning. My assumption has always been that in the denser parts of the city, because basically the median person is, and mean person is doing less VMT, there's probably less pavement cost per capita there, even if the individual roads may be busier. But I don't know to what extent that is the case. And so I could see it being useful to characterize some of these different impacts so that council especially can make more informed decisions about how to find ways and allocate resources to get pavement better. It's not, it may not always just be throw more money at it.
So cost drivers?
Yeah, understanding the cost drivers would be, I suspect would be valuable. I mean, BPAC's not the entity making those decisions, so. But it is something that I'm always somewhat curious about on this presentation. And I guess my more general comment would be, I always appreciate seeing this presentation when it comes up. There's a lot that stays the same in terms of what's in the presentation, but it always ends up with a lot of questions. So I get the feeling it's useful.
Member Stone?
Yeah, I would like to ask from Bruce England's comment. Is it possible, especially as we get more and more separated bike lanes, to have the bike infrastructure and the road infrastructure graded separately? Is that something the contractor could do, or we could ask them to do?
So I would have to put that to the question to the contractors. And I could actually reach out to MTC and ask if how other cities approach this as an issue. Like I said, as a primer, when I was trained this way, you go out there and you look at what's representative. That should be independent of what the striping shows. But that's a good conversation to have with MTC, with other cities, to get that feedback.
Yeah, I don't know, personally aware of. Aside from where when the gutter is in the bike lane, that always creates a problem, but aside from that, I'm not. But it would be interesting to know, and it could be also very useful, especially along. Castro, has the separated bikes, and you don't want students exiting from, for example, or beginning that.
Sorry, what was that last thing?
Oh, I was thinking about as we have more separated bike lanes, it would, if there is a significant difference between the PCI of the bike lane and the street itself, it would be very good to know that. And I'm thinking specifically of kids going to school like Graham, going along Castro. That's our only one right now.
So at this point, my question to MTC or the consultant might be, is there a way to grade the bike lanes separately
Mhm.
from,
Yeah.
from the rest of, or the pavement section in general?
Mhm.
That's where I'll start.
Another? Member Dominic?
Yes, maybe following up on the, bike lane in front of Graham. It is somewhat bumpy and it made me think, and I also followed and asked Mountain View, and it's a little bit embarrassing to mention, but like sometimes when the bike lane is uneven, it's not just the safety issue, but it's also a comfort issue, I think, especially for women who have that it becomes kind of a high impact sport in a way that like when you're walking, you don't need to wear a sports bra, and when you're driving, you don't need to wear a sports bra, but like when you're biking around town, if the pavement is uneven, you kind of do. And I think that could deter young women, especially, young women biking to middle school. It's like, might not be then the mode that they would like to do. And then also I really like the speed humps in that they allow bicyclists, for example, on Latham or Fairchild to share the road with cars, but it also is then a little bit more like a hill sport that again it won't be comfortable for everyone unless they wear specialized wardrobe. So I think finding solutions where biking can be just kind of a smooth ride beyond just the safety considerations. I think up to this point I would only really ask Mountain View tickets if I felt like, wow, the bump is so huge that someone who's not paying attention could like hit that and then fly off their bike. But I think even short of that, it would be good to have just better quality. And then for the presentation, like what happens when it's always like a link to the same page is that I'm like, okay, so what's different? Or I'm not very good at like looking at the differences. So if by any chance the presentation is available ahead of time, I think that would be helpful to get me in the mindset of thinking about specific things. And then the clarifying questions I'd asked about what was completed and what's planned. I think incorporating that would also be, if it's a minimal effort update, I think that would be nice. And I just wanted to say, I really appreciate that the pavement quality for the trail network was done. That was like really great. Thanks a lot.
Welcome.
Any further comment?
Sure. So, thanks for the presentation, and I think for anybody, it was useful for me. So that's the first one. I wanted to comment also on the, how we look at the streets with different sections, like the bike lanes or things like this. And a lot of the streets is used for parking. So are we looking at the PCI for, the travel lanes as opposed to the parking lanes? And the city also has some lot of parking surfaces. So is it also something that is part of of this? Because I mean, to me, it's less important to have a good PCI for parking, than for travel. Obviously, the risks are quite different. So,
Thank you. So I'd just like to make two comments. One is thank you very much for including the trail network. I think normalizing the trails are used for commuting, for utility trips and shopping, as well as recreation and socialization, just as roads are, makes it more normal and gets people thinking about alternate transportation modes. So thank you very much for doing that. The other comment, I will second the idea that the right side of the road is often in poor condition because the number of construction cuts and sewer locations or water main attachments. And so discussion perhaps with MTC, especially if they use automated surface readers, are they driving along the gutter or are they driving in the normal travel lane, they may get different readings. At least that's my experience on a bike, is often the right side or the right lane or the shoulder or the parking area, if bikes are riding in that, is rougher just because of the number of cuts that are often made. And they may decay faster than the left side of the road where there are cuts. Okay, last one, Lana, please.
I just wanted to say, like, for me, it's like between riding my bike and driving my heavy electric utility vehicle. And so I think it's helpful to think of bike projects as like contributing to preserving pavement, because anywhere I can bike, I'm not gonna be in my heavy car ripping up the pavement, so.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for adding that. I don't think we need any motions here. So I think we can close item 6.2 on the pavement management.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward on item 6.3 to work plan. So we have some review and recommendation.
Yes, so we have just the, yeah, the work plan. Just looking at how we're doing in getting through our annual work plan. So on this first page, TDA 3 is coming soon. In terms of B plans, we've brought the active transportation plan a couple of times, it'll come back. And Miramonte ditto. Ongoing work on the ped bike facilities. CIP will be coming, Joy will bring that, I think, next time, in April, early April. For F, public projects, there's been a number of those. I'll add Moffat Complete Streets and also the 101 Rangstoff, which you saw in December. So those are two things to add to this list. Safety programs are ongoing and coordination is also ongoing. We don't have a joint meeting identified, but we have been working on it. And then down to I, police data you saw last time. So that's actually something we'll add to this as well. Safe Routes to School, we'll be bringing that back, and we'll bring back also this year's program. Events, we've done several of those. And the ATP, we're adjusting that through N, which you will be seeing next time. And legislative review, we did that in October. Vision Zero, you've seen the marketing and outreach, which is listed here, but you will also see kind of an update on how we're progressing with implementation of the Vision Zero action plan, which was adopted last September. And then TDM ordinance you saw last month, and Miramonte you saw in December. So making progress through there. Tentative agenda list, just a few changes to here, and I'll note that we have cancelled the March 26th meeting, and we have a March 11th meeting planned, as well as there's a planned meeting on the 2nd of April to accommodate the CIP schedule. So a couple of changes there. Yeah.
Okay, do we have any public comments at this point?
I do not see any hands raised on Zoom.
And no commenters in the room at this point. Moving to clarifying questions.
First off, on the, I guess, we always tend to lump them a bit together, but on the TDA Article 3 funding and or on the active transportation improvements funding, in the past year or two, we tried to have alternatives for those ready so that it wouldn't just be a like defer or do this one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that going to be the case? And pardon me if this, I checked I don't think we heard anything about this in the past couple months meeting, so pardon me if I'm misremembering.
Correct. So we did that last year. We came in November with a bunch of alternatives and then came back. We have, and so one of the things that rose to the top there was Middlefield bikeways. And that one, we're still in process with that, so we didn't bring back more alternatives because we haven't finished what we were planning with the active transportation improvements work. So that's that one. And TDA 3, so last time we added funding to the Miramonte project. So we didn't bring it back in November, so we'll just bring it back as a single item.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess was just, when those arrive, will we have more than one option of what to do with things? I think that's what we've found. I think that's what's been found.
That's what the
frustrating.
request was, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll try and bring you more than one option.
Okay. I think that's what's been sometimes frustrating in the
Yeah.
past, so that's why I'm asking about it now. People get to that stage and it's like, wait a minute. Okay.
We like to provide a recommendation, but.
Yeah,
maybe-
I think we've generally gone with the recommendation, but I'm just trying to
Yeah,
make sure we're confused or surprised when we get there. And then a item got added for the council strategic work plan. I think I have some sense of what that includes, but what is
sorry, which one was that?
there's a council strategic work plan item
yes.
on the April 2nd meeting. Can you elaborate a bit as to what the scope or nature of that item is?
So I think that there are two things. One thing is council's approval of the BPAC work plan, the annual work plan. But council also has, like, I think every 2 years they have their strategic priorities. And so we did an exercise a couple of years ago where we voted on something, it came from the city manager's office. And so I think that they'll bring back down something like that again.
Okay. I didn't
And it
remember
was
that,
beyond
so-
transportation, it was for all the different priorities
Oh, I
throughout the
remember
city.
that one.
So our input going up.
Yes.
Oh, I remember that a couple years ago. Yeah, I think they changed the process a bit this year. So it might be a bit different,
Okay.
but okay. Those are my questions.
Okay, going down the line. Member Martin?
Sure, so when is Earth Day for Mountain View, I guess?
Oh, it's so we're celebrating, I
I know
think,
that's the 22nd.
yeah, it's the 22nd, but I think we're celebrating here. Let me just check. And maybe this comes in upcoming activities, but I think, I'm not sure whether
April.
It has to
I
be
don't think
I think it's the 19th or something. Is that a Saturday? Yeah. April 19th is we're going to have a celebration at the community centre.
I'll be in Sydney, so.
Oh, lucky you.
I'll be in Houston.
I don't know whether you're lucky or not.
But I don't know if it's going to be Earth Day there, so.
Stone? Yeah. Okay, seeing no further clarifying questions, I guess we're.
I had one, again, as a newbie, in preparation for the discussion on the active transportation plans, so is there like a kind of Reader's Digest of things to to go through?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so to prepare for that, the upcoming discussions on the active transportation plan, is there like a mass read kind of list? of
Oh,
things for
I
me to
see, as a
catch
new
up? So-
member. So we have brought it several times to BPAC.
Yeah,
In terms of background reading, you might want to go to one of the council, like maybe look at the latest thing that went to council.
Oh, I see. So pretty much read from the staff reports. and
Yeah.
I
Discussions.
think there was I feel like the last time it came before BPAC formally was approving the scope, or there's a scope document or something like that. Or an existing conditions report, that's what it was.
I was gonna suggest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's been a couple of things that happened, so maybe going back to there are a couple of rounds of going to council since then.
And I understand there is like a sub-advisory committee or things like this. Are there minutes or notes or things like this to
For the
to
work
read?
group, you mean that there was a work group, right? Is that
Yeah.
What you're talking about?
Yeah.
For the Active Transportation Advisory Committee,
Yeah.
I don't know that we have minutes for that, the consultant might have minutes, but we'll be providing that with the next item that comes to BPAC. So you'll see
Okay.
their input from that.
Okay. So
Yeah.
but it's not something that exists, but I don't know.
Yes, no.
That's good.
Okay,
Again, so.
no further clarifying questions, moving to comments.
Or comments on this
Comments
topic?
on the work plan, yes. None, just reminding that the meetings have moved, or canceled later in the month, moved earlier. Okay, I think that wraps up item 6.3 on the work plan. So go ahead and moving to item 6.4, Santa Clara Valley Transportation Agency Advisory Committee update.
Oh, yes. So it was a short meeting. I guess in the announcements, VTA is helping to coordinate around the World Cup, which will be in part at Levi Stadium. And so the committee just wanted to know, are you going to close down the bike paths around that for a month again? Or are there going to be ways to get around? Unknown, but at least it was brought up. And then the vehicle miles traveled mitigation kind of policy plan was presented in its final form, which is that I mean, this is something that the various jurisdictions would need to adopt. Mountain View, we saw, had a proposal to have one of the mitigation things that developers or companies could implement would be to contribute to the VTA plan, which for now has a bank or would set up a bank. I mean, it's all theoretical at this point, where they could contribute funds, and then those funds could fund e-bike vouchers or transit improvements, things like that. And the committee just wanted more bike options besides like e-bike vouchers. And then the last thing was several sites for transit-oriented development, and there's a link you can see where the sites are.
Okay, as always, thank you. Clarifying question or comments from the members of the public?
I don't see any hands raised on Zoom.
Moving to clarifying questions from committee members. Moving to committee comments. Okay, closing item 6.4 then and moving to item 7. Announcements, staff and committee announcements, updates, requests, and reports.
Okay, so that's me. So starting with some recent events, we last time you looked at the TDM ordinance framework and it went to Environmental Planning Commission after it came here. We also submitted, Verena did a lot of work on a couple of grant applications for Measure B Innovative Transit program. And so we submitted 2 applications. And then also, and there was a collaboration there also with the Mountain View Transportation Management Association, which is great. And we had the Active Transportation Plan Advisory Committee last night. In terms of things that are underway, we have a whole lot of things underway at the moment. So the Castro Street curb ramps, you might have seen that we're getting some new ADA compliant curb ramps along the street. The intersections at Rengstorff Latham and Shoreline Latham are going into construction or already in construction. Rengstorff Latham is in construction. And so that they're updating it, they're upgrading it to an 8-phase signal, and there's some other improvements happening there as well. The NTMP, the Neighborhood Traffic Management Program pilot, is imminent for Wasatch Street. They're going to be having a street closure at Diricks, and there's going to be speed reductions based on AB 43 along Dana Street between Calderon and Moore Park and the entirety of Grant Road. And so I think they'll be going down to 25 miles per hour. And then California Complete Streets, we have, I think there'll be a notice to proceed on the 3rd of March. So that will be going into construction soon. And El Camino Real, so you can see they've already done the pavement and the striping for the vehicular lanes. The funding for the bike facilities and the crossings was separate, and that has now been funded. They got that through the California Transportation Commission. So good news there. In terms of upcoming events, we have a community workshop next Monday for the Moffett Boulevard Precise Plan. And then we have a CTC meeting on the 4th of March, where we'll be taking the TDM framework. We have a community meeting, community workshop on the 5th of March for the active transportation plan. So lots going on next week. And then we have a special BPAC meeting on the 11th. And we're expecting to have an event to celebrate our new electric buses after they arrive, which is TBD. Finally, we have a bit of an update for a few months from last summer. Here we are. So just catching up on Ask MVs. So the theme seems to be blockages to bike lanes and sidewalks, and some of these in terms of the bike facilities were construction related. Also kind of a steady inflow of information on near miss data, and sorry, I don't have more details on what those were. Brandon provided this information for us, so I'll have to follow up on what some of the details are. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Questions, committee members? Stone?
I'm curious, I didn't know we were getting new electric buses. What's wrong with the old electric buses?
We don't have electric buses at the moment. So when Google was running the shuttle program, they were electric, and those reached their end of life. And so we had, as an interim measure, we have some gas powered buses, which is what we're currently using. Those are now at their end of life, and so that we've had some issues with breakdowns. And we had ordered electric buses quite a while ago from a company that, you know, went out of business. Then we ordered from another company, and the batteries of that company were acquired by Volvo. So there was kind of some changes. So there's been a number of different things that have happened. I guess it's a evolving market.
It's been a while since I rode the shuttle.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any further clarifying question, Member Dominic?
Yes, how did the speed reductions or speed limit reductions come about?
So our traffic group analyzed a variety of streets based on AB 43. And I think that part of Dana Street, my understanding is the school kind of plays a factor in the evaluation there as well. So I can they evaluated that.
Evaluates it and then they just set the new limit and that's it? Like that's.
So, well, I think the fact that we're now allowed to go -5 miles per hour allowed them to drop it further.
Was it driven by a request or?
No, it was
Yeah.
more like a evaluation of the whole city,
Okay,
of
so
where it could apply.
the periodic evaluation?
Yeah.
Initial.
Is it only these two streets? Or?
Yes. They already dropped the speed limit along Calderon last year. And I think there was one other street that, I can't remember, there might have been one other street in addition to Calderon that had a speed reduction.
Okay, further committee questions? Was there a member of public?
Yes, we do have a member of public raised hand. April Webster, you may unmute yourself.
Sure. I just, Rhea had talked about ECR and Caltrans, and this was presented to, an update on ECR was presented to the D4, the Caltrans D4 back and pack yesterday morning. And there are a few things that may be of interest to this group. One is that the timeline, they're hoping to put in the quick curb starting at the beginning of June. They're hoping to have bike lanes all completed by September 12th of this year. They are going to consider doing a celebration, given that it seems the cities and SVBC are pushing on it. And then I think what might be of more interest was I asked the project manager, Yunmi Choi, about no turn on red, given that this had been successful in Palo Alto. And she said that they're willing to consider it. They just need a request from the cities if they'd like to see no turn on red, no right on red on ECR. And so a request needs to be put on. As long as traffic safety agrees, they can install it. And that's all I had to share about that. reach out to me if you have more questions. There were other topics covered, and it is a public meeting, so if you're ever interested, you can hop into it. Thank you.
That's all I got.
Okay, seeing no public comment in the room, moving on to any committee comments. Sorry,
Oh,
member Thomas?
I just wanted to say, I think that the speed reduction is great. I must admit, though, that driving on Dana, even though I really intend to only go 25, there's something about like the downslope going toward Calderon. I often catch myself like going a little bit above 25, so I don't know. I know I just spoke like about how bumps are uncomfortable or whatever, but I think maybe some additional encouragement to not go above the speed limit would be good, at least on Dana.
A very steep bridge. Yeah, there used to be a race of sub boxes. Yeah. Yeah.
Additional committee comments?
I have one on the, I guess, what's gonna be bike lanes. I don't know, but they're kind of marked on El Camino. So my observation is that this is used pretty much right now as a protected parking, essentially. And I'm wondering if there's some enforcements that can be done, as well as, making it clear that this is not a parking area, this is a bike lane.
I can comment on that because I put in an Ask Mountain View. I commute on El Camino every day. There are barricades up with plastic signs. The response from the police department was they didn't think the barricades with plastic signs were sufficient for enforcement, so they would be waiting to enforce no parking in the bike lanes until Caltrain installs their signage. So somewhat disappointing, but
But what's needed? I mean, it's striped right now. Right?
it's
Signs.
the roadway signs, because if you've ever fought a parking ticket, there's all kinds of ways to get around it. And the police department saying they don't want to give tickets that aren't gonna be held up.
But isn't it like the whole length of El Camino doesn't have
The
parking?
whole
So,
length of El Camino,
so we
they
need like a signs on the new
I
section.
don't
every 10
think you need
feet or
signs
something
for a
like this.
bike facility, because there's no
Uh,
parking.
Parking
I mean-
enforcement.
parking
Parking enforcement.
in the bike facility.
You do a bike lane that doesn't have no parking signs or red curbs or the such. You're allowed to park, and I don't know what the rules about protected facilities are, but these aren't protected yet.
It's coming in phases.
Yeah, the bike lane is not protected yet, and there's no, I think,
Right.
at least the section I've seen, it doesn't say bike lane in that striping yet.
It's coming in phases, if I may answer, Aruna, within just today, that's my regular commute route also, and just today I saw some pavement marking that said bike lane. But again, there's no protection, like you said. It's coming in phases, improvements are happening. It's weather dependent also, so.
So what's gonna be needed, I guess, to enforce it, I guess?
The police department response was, Caltrain has to install the red and white no parking signs in those sections that haven't previously had them.
So we're gonna have signs on like every 10 feet, or, I mean, that doesn't seem.
I don't know what the standard is, but there will be new
It
signs.
seems expensive for, I don't know.
We'll check into it.
reasons, so.
Additional committee comments? Okay, seeing none, I think we,
Item 7.2.
so, we've closed 7.1 on staff comments. Moving on to committee comments and updates. Don't believe we have any requests. Okay, closing item 7. Closing item 7 with the conclusion of 7.2, moving to item 8, set date and time for next meeting. So currently the normally scheduled Wednesday meeting at the end of the month is canceled. And a special meeting scheduled for Tuesday, March 11th at 6:30 PM is set for the next meeting time. No questions, no comments. Reminder of the future calendar. Item 9, again, a special BPAC meeting on early April, April 2nd. 6:30 PM, normally scheduled April meeting, April 30th, 6:30 PM. We normally do not have a May meeting and none is scheduled at this point. And then the tentative, our planned date for the June meeting is the normal last Wednesday of June 25th at 6:30. Okay, no other items. I think we're ready to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
My fixing.